Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Gopi Jana Bhalabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Girivardhari Yasodhanandana Brajachandana Yasodhanandana Brajachandana Yamuna Tira Vana Chanti Yamuna Vana Chanti Yasodhanandana Brajachandana Yasodhanandana Brajachandana Yamuna Tira Vana Chanti Yamuna Tira Vana Chanti Jaya Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivijakacharya Astatara Sutta Sisimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Ananda Koti Vaishnavrinda ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Gora Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. As you see, chapter 1 is pretty long. Chapter 7 of Canto 11. This is where we're going to begin the Uddhava Gita section. And just a little bit of procedure. I'd like to do something similar, but not the same. Something similar to what we've been doing with the 10th canto discussion, that is, reading commentaries. However, the commentaries are not as extensive, and so sometimes I'll be able to cover several verses in a row, like tomorrow. Actually, it's not going to be tomorrow, it's going to be Tuesday. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wrote extensive commentary on the entire Uddhava Gita, and someone very kindly translated it into English. So we'll be reading from sections of his commentary. In fact, for example, the chapter summary we'll read this morning is his, and comparing the chapter summary that's in the BBT and his, it looks like they just lifted from his commentary. It's not verbatim, but it's quite similar in content. So we'll have those kinds of resources available to us. The first class, the intention was to give a large overview of what happens before Uddhava Gita, what happens just after Uddhava Gita. Specifically, as the painting shows, Uddhava Gita was spoken in Dwarka, and later on, at the time of Krishna's departure, there's another celebrated painting of Maitreya listening to Krishna's and Uddhava's conversation, which happens just before Krishna's departure, which is a different discussion between Uddhava and Krishna. So that overview was done, and since this begins with chapter 7, Krishna's answers to Uddhava, I thought to give a reading of Uddhava's questions. So Uddhava's questions come at the very end of chapter 6 of Canto 11, and prior to that, in the beginning part of chapter 6 is the curse of the sages to the Yadu dynasty. And just after that, the demigods visit Dwarka, that Krishna advises them to go to Prabhas. The demigods come while they're preparing to go to Prabhas. And headed by Lord Brahma, specifically it says he's hovering in the air, exactly how it doesn't describe, and they offer prayers, and then Brahma speaks about Krishna's having lived 125 autumns, means years, fulfilling his pledge. So now that the demons have been destroyed, which was his pledge, he, if he so desires, may return to his abode, and there's some indication it's a good idea to take the Yadus with you. And after they depart, Krishna contemplates the necessity of withdrawing the Yadus, and then he again reminds them of this importance of their going to Prabhas for purification, and gives reasons why. It's known, for example, if the moon was cursed by Daksha, went there, bathed in the sea by Prabhas, by the river Saraswati, and became immediately freed from that curse of Daksha, who was also Brahman, so he advised them this way. And then the end of chapter 6, Canto 11, Uddhava, being so close and intimately connected with Krishna, he understands Krishna's intention, and he then pleads with Krishna to take him with him. So I want to read that section, not too many verses. Starts with chapter 6, text 42. Sri Uddhava said, O my Lord, O Supreme God among the demigods, real piety is invoked simply by hearing and chanting your transcendental glories. My Lord, it appears that you will now withdraw your dynasty, and thus you yourself will finally give up your pastimes within this universe. You are the supreme controller and the master of all mystic powers, but although you are fully capable of counteracting the Brahmana's curse against your dynasty, you are not doing so, and your disappearance is imminent. It's okay? Oh, Lord Keshava, my dear master, I cannot tolerate giving up your lotus feet for even a fraction of a moment. I urge you to take me along with you to your own abode. Oh, my dear Krishna, your pastimes are supremely auspicious for mankind and are an intoxicating beverage for the ears. Tasting such pastimes, people forget their desires for other things. My dear Lord, you are the Supreme Soul, and thus you are most dear to us. We are your devotees, and how can we possibly reject you or live without you, even for a moment? Whether we are lying down, sitting, walking, standing, bathing, enjoying recreation, eating, or doing anything else, we are constantly engaged in your service, simply by decorating ourselves with the garlands, fragrant oils, clothes, and ornaments that you have already enjoyed, and by eating the remnants of your meals, we, your servants, will indeed conquer your illusory energy. Naked sages who seriously endeavor in spiritual practice, who have raised their semen upward, who are peaceful and sinless members of the renounced order, attain the spiritual abode called Brahman, but that's not what he wants. O greatest of mystics, although we are conditioned souls wandering on the path of fruitive work, we will certainly cross beyond the darkness of this material world, and simply by hearing about your Lordship in the association of your devotees. Thus, we are always remembering and glorifying the wonderful things you do and the wonderful things you say. We ecstatically recall your amorous pastimes with your confidential conjugal devotees, and how you boldly smile and move about while engaging in such youthful pastimes. My dear Lord, your loving pastimes are bewildering, similar to the activities of the ordinary people within this material world. Shukadeva Goswami said, O King Parikshit, thus addressed, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, the son of Devaki, began to reply confidentially to his dear, unalloyed servant Uddhava. So let us remember Uddhava's position. He's the dearmost of Krishna's associates outside of Vrindavan. He sent him to Vrindavan to get a glimpse of the love of the residents of Vrindavan, and he was overwhelmed, and he made his prayer to become a blade of grass in Vrindavan, so that he could get the dust of the lotus feet of the gopis upon his head. And then he returned back to Mathura, then for a long time with Krishna in Dwaraka. Krishna here in Dwaraka. He did many, many, many nice things with Krishna. Krishna looked to him not just as a friend, but someone whose counsel he would take, and whatever Uddhava said he would do. He was very intimate associate of Krishna. And he knows very well he's about to depart. He wants to go with him. Now there's some, when Krishna is contemplating before that little arrival of Uddhava, I could read the pages, but the verses, but Krishna, at the demigods depart, Krishna contemplates. I have to remove the Yadu dynasty, and what the demigods request of me is right. And I want to leave behind Uddhava because he has no attraction for anything material. And after my departure, it's going to get really difficult. But he won't be disturbed, nor will he be attracted by opulence. So I want to give him teachings. It's an intention to leave him and leave him with teachings to give to others, because he's qualified. So that is the prelude to the instructions, starting with chapter 7. So here's the chapter 7 summary, translated from Bhaktisiddhanta's writing. Chapter 7. This chapter describes how Uddhava requested the Lord to grant him permission to go back to Godhead, and how, in response, the Lord suggested that he take to the renounced order of life. It also deals with the Avaduta's description of 24 spiritual masters. That's the summary of the chapter. And it's a long chapter. After hearing the prayerful request of Uddhava, from chapter 6, Sri Krishna revealed to him his desire to return to his eternal abode, since the purpose of his appearance in this world had been fulfilled. The Lord also indicated that soon after his disappearance, Kali will create great disturbances in the world, so Uddhava should take sannyas, fix his mind upon him, and live in this temporary world without attachment, while acting as a benefactor of all living entities. Uddhava replied by saying that apart from devotees of the Lord, detachment from matter, which is the cause of spiritual advancement, is extremely difficult for those who are very attached to sense gratification. Important. He requested the Lord to give him some instructions so that materialistic people who consider the body as the self could attain perfection. Sounds like an important chapter. And in response, Uddhava told the Lord that he had taken shelter of him as the only instructor because he is free from all faults, omniscient, the Lord of Vaikuntha, and the friend of all living entities. After hearing Uddhava's request, the Supreme Lord said that the spirit soul is himself. The spirit soul is himself, should be in himself, can act as his spiritual master. And thus the human form of life is very dear to him, capital H. In this connection, the Lord related to Uddhava a conversation between an Avaduta and King Yadu that took place long ago. Yadu is one of the ancestors or predecessor kings of Krishna in the same line, the Yadu dynasty. Once, King Yadu, the son of Yayati, happened to see an Avaduta who was happily wandering about here and there, sometimes acting like a materialist, sometimes like a madman, and sometimes like one haunted by a ghost. When King Yadu asked the Avaduta about the cause of his ecstatic wanderings, he replied that he was traveling throughout the world as he liked, after having received instructions from 24 spiritual masters, such as the earth, air, sky, water, and fire. That's 5. Due to these instructions, he was able to wander over the earth in a liberated condition of life. Paragraph. From the earth he learned how to become steady. He also learned from the mountains and trees of the earth how to do good to others, how to live in this world only for the sake of others' benefit. From the life air he learned how to remain satisfied with whatever is easily achieved for keeping the body and soul together. In addition, from the external air, he learned how to remain aloof from bodily sense enjoyment. From the sky, he learned that the spirit soul, which is all-pervading throughout the body, is always pure and free from any contamination. From water, he learned how to remain naturally pure and sanctified. Almost done. From fire, he learned to eat anything and yet not become contaminated. He also learned that a charitable person will never face inauspiciousness. He learned that the spirit soul is that which illuminates every material body, and that the appearance and disappearance of the living entity at the times of birth and death is unseen. That's the soul. From the moon, he learned how the material body develops and then dwindles. Phases of the moon. From the sun, he learned how, despite remaining in contact with the objects of enjoyment, one can remain unentangled. He also learned how the spirit soul is unchangeable, while the material body is simply a designation. Sounds a little involved, right? 24 gurus with different lessons. From the pigeon, he learned about the consequences of too much affection for one's family. A person who, in spite of receiving the human form of life, which is considered the gateway to liberation, becomes attached to family life like a pigeon, will certainly fall down, even though he has attained a superior platform after much struggle. So that's the chapter summary, and we're just going to attempt to cover the first verse today. Uddhava has presented his request and glorification. Krishna is considering and responding. And the Sanskrit, it sounds similar, but it's different from Yad Atta Mam Mahabhaga. You remembered it a little differently. Seven sloka? Okay. Yad Atta Mam Mahabhaga. The Supreme Personality Godhead said, "Oh, greatly fortunate Uddhava, you have accurately revealed my desire to withdraw the Yadu dynasty from the earth and return to my own abode in Vaikuntha. Thus, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all other planetary rulers are now praying for me to resume my residence in Vaikuntha." They appeared and they said all those things. And by the way, Krishna said, on my way back to Godhead, I'll take a short stop at your Brahmaloka. No description of that visit to Brahmaloka that I'm aware of, but he said, so I'm sure he did, on his way. And here's the BBT purport, which is kind of long, and the other commentaries are much shorter. Each and every demigod has his particular abode in the heavenly planets within the material universe. Although Lord Vishnu is sometimes counted among the demigods, his abode is in Vaikuntha, the spiritual sky. The demigods are universal controllers within the kingdom of Maya, but Vishnu is the Lord of the illusory potency and many other spiritual potencies. his exalted residence does not lie within the kingdom of his insignificant maidservant Maya. Paragraph. Lord Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, is the supreme Lord of all lords, semicolon. The demigods are separated parts and parcels. Being themselves minute jiva souls, the demigods are under the influence of the potency of Maya, but Lord Vishnu is always the supreme controller of Maya. The personality of Godhead is the reservoir and root of all existence, and the material world is just a dim reflection of the brilliant scenery of his eternal spiritual abode, where everything is infinitely beautiful and pleasurable. Vishnu is the supreme reality, and no living entity can ever be equal to or greater than him. The Lord exists within his own unique category, called Vishnu Tattva, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All other prominent or extraordinary living entities owe their positions and potencies to the Lord. Ultimately, Vishnu himself is a plenary expansion of Lord Krishna, the original source of all Vishnu Tattva and Jiva Tattva expansions. Thus, Lord Krishna is the basis of everything. So we hear this again and again, so must be important because it's repeated again and again. Here is an image of the Vaikuntha realm. Now, it's mentioned several times, Vaikuntha, which could include, or it could exclude, but it could include Goloka Vrindavan, because that's certainly the original personality Godhead's abode. But he's not in Vrindavan, he's in Dwarka, and that Dwarka is also in Krishna Loka, but its counterpart is also in Vaikuntha. So let's read quickly. Bhaktisiddhanta has written a purport. The word Svarvasa, refers to the planets where the demigods reside, like Swargaloka, Svarvasa. Although Lord Vishnu is sometimes counted among the demigods, his residence is in Vaikuntha. So we heard that from the BBT commentary. The heavenly planets created by Lord's external potency Maya are different from his abode. Lord Vishnu is the supreme controller of all controllers. From him, all the demigods have manifested. But they are under the control of Maya, whereas Lord Vishnu is the controller of Maya. The Supreme Lord Vishnu is the root of all existence, and the material world is just a dim reflection of his eternal spiritual abode. He is one without a second, and the original source of all spiritual and material manifestations. Lord Vishnu is a plenary expansion of Lord Krishna, the original source of all Vishnu Tattva and Jiva Tattva expansions. That was Bhaktisiddhanta's commentary. So just for a little break, we'll read this nice background, and the work, the graphics of this presentation is compliments of Shruti Mangara. Each one she takes a long time to build, the background and the overlay and this and that. So compliments to her for her work. She's already working on chapter 9. She says she'll be finished by today. So we have, probably about 3 months worth of work, maybe 2 months, to complete what she's done. The personality of Godhead is the reservoir and root of all existence. And the material world is just a dim reflection of the brilliant scenery of his eternal spiritual abode, where everything is infinitely beautiful and pleasurable. Vishnu is the supreme reality, and no living entity can ever be equal to or greater than him. Now that sounds like Prabhupada's writing, so maybe it comes from someplace where he's written about this verse. This, just keep in mind the context. He's going to depart. He knows that Uddhava knows. Uddhava knows that he's going to depart. So these are consoling the heart of Uddhava kind of instructions. Because their relationship is very intimate. Supposing somebody's in their deathbed, or in his case, he's not on a deathbed; he's just going to depart. But the imminent departure is imminent, and the bond of love is otherworldly, and he wants to go with him. So there's some words having glorified Krishna's position. Krishna is now responding in a kind of like a third-person way, but he's acknowledging, in one sense, he's acknowledging what Uddhava has glorified. It's not so dissimilar. The language is different, but it's not so dissimilar from sections of Bhagavad Gita where Krishna declares who he is, Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo, etc. Like those sections of Bhagavad Gita, that's Krishna does that from time to time. He's speaking. He doesn't speak this way to the residents of Vrindavan. I am this, I am that. He's speaking that way to Uddhava because Uddhava knows. Uddhava has maximum knowledge and a great affinity for his sweetness both. He's a very special individual. So emphasis here is going to his majesty or his opulences, his being the source of everything. The other additional commentaries are really short. We'll start with Vishwanath. In this 7th chapter, desiring to give Uddhava Gyan and Vairagya, Krishna speaks of various gurus starting with the earth mentioned by the Avaduta. Then his commentary ends with one more sentence. The word svar vasa, because svar, it sounds like that the root is the heavenly realm. But svar vasa in this case means the spiritual realm, a residence of Vaikuntha. And then there's some explanation we'll hear. Putana attained Krishna's planet, Svargam. That's mentioned with Putana. So the word Svarga conventionally means the heavenly realm for demigods, but context specific, it can also mean the spiritual realm. That's the point. Svarga means the place of highest happiness, not the heavenly planets, as in the following verse from this very first verse of chapter 7. Brahma bhavo lokapala svar vasam me bhikanchinaha. Brahma, Shiva, and all other planetary rulers are now praying for me to resume my residence in Vaikuntha. And that's it for this particular Vaishnav Toshani commentary. Reference to this verse is made in chapter 37 of Canto 10, where it reads, Vargam means the heavenly planets. Where did Putana go at the time of her death? She attained Vaikuntha. That is explained in this first verse, 11.7.1. Brahma and Shiva and all other planetary rulers are praying for me to live in Vaikuntha. That's Svavasam. We just read 10:14:35. Putana attained you along with all her family members. According to these two verses, that's this one, and 10:14:35. According to these two verses, the word Swarga must mean Svavasam, your personal abode, or Vaikuntha. The word does not refer to the material heavenly planet called Swarga. And the final to Uddhava. You have also achieved what you desire, attaining my abode when the dynasty is withdrawn. So he's indicating that's, in short, Krishna has intentions for Uddhava. Protection, service of taking his teachings and propagating his teachings. He has another intention, we just read, of when Uddhava's service is finished, he'll attain the spiritual world. Now, we hear conventionally that Uddhava prayed to become a blade of grass, and indeed he became a blade of grass at Uddhava Kund. And when the history says, Padma Purana says, when Krishna instructed Daruka to leave, go to Dwaraka, inform the inhabitants of Dwaraka, A and B. Prabhas just happened, all the Yadu dynasty members are gone, and B, the remaining residents in Dwaraka should carefully be transported or shifted to go to Indraprastha or Hastinapur for their protection, particularly his queens. And we know that Arjuna is the one who helped in making that transition. So they're going from Dwaraka to Indraprastha or eventually Hastinapur. And it's said in Padma Purana that the queens, under the care of the great-grandson of Krishna, whose name was what? Vajranava, great-grandson of Krishna. Vajranava was appointed as king of Mathura, so the queens were shifted to his care in Mathura. And from time to time, Vajranava would go to visit Vrindavan, because his great-grandfather, Krishna, spent so much time in Vrindavan. So he became acquainted with Vrindavan. And the queens one day asked him, can you take us to Vrindavan? We want to see this place that our beloved husband and your great-grandfather Krishna loved so much. Can you take us there? So the decision is made. Narada accompanies them. They go to Uddhava Kund. They have wonderful kirtan. And in that wonderful kirtan, who should appear but Uddhava? And Uddhava tells them all about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. He spends a month telling them all the pastimes. This is from the section of Padma Purana called the Bhagavad Mahatmya section. So it's a section of Bhagavatam that's honoring Srimad Bhagavatam. When we visited the place where Krishna spoke Bhagavatam, we read from that section of Padma Purana. Maybe you remember. Maybe you don't remember. I remember. It's a very elevated section of Padma Purana. So that history of the queens going to Vrindavan, specifically to Uddhava Kund, and in the course of hearing, Padma Purana says, the queens one by one went back to the spiritual world. That's how their pastime or presence on earth was ended, by hearing Krishna's pastimes, essentially hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So although the image here is Vaikuntha, because the term Vaikuntha is used, we should understand it doesn't mean Swarga, it means the spiritual realm. And because Krishna's eternal abode is Krishna Loka, it means that portion of Vaikuntha that's known as Krishna Loka. But that's okay. We're looking at a Vaikuntha picture. So that's just the beginning. And it's a 74 verse long chapter, so we'll continue Tuesday morning with a few verses. I'm looking forward to going into this. There are parts of it that are a little complex, and there are parts that are really simple. It's all relevant instruction. It's like Bhagavad Gita. It's Krishna speaking. So it's really important. The infallible authority, Krishna. But he's speaking, in this case, to Uddhava, who's far more learned than Arjuna, who's, exalted devotee, but he doesn't have the erudition like Uddhava has. Uddhava's a minister, and Arjuna is a warrior. Doesn't mean Arjuna doesn't know the conclusions of spiritual teachings, but the subtleties and so forth, it's more involved in Uddhava Gita, celebrated section of the Bhagavatam. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Uddhava is saying that to Krishna, take me with you. And in the last class you said that Uddhava is a Vaikuntha Vasi. So does this mean, is this that Krishna is also going back to Vaikuntha? This is Vasudev Krishna?
Good question. I'm uncertain the answer. One could take it either way, I suppose. Because Krishna reveals to his devotee that form or feature of him that they're particularly devoted to. Now, on the one hand, to say that, I'm not sure, to say that Uddhava is a Vaikunthavasi, there must be some scriptural reference that I was referring to or relying upon to say that. At the same time, he is with Krishna in Dwarka and Mathura in his pastimes, which isn't exactly a Vaikunthavasi position. It's a Goloka position within Mathura and Dwarka. It's not the same as Vaikuntha. So, I'm not so sure. The feature is not Vrindavan Krishna or Nanda Nandana Krishna, because that's not the mood of Uddhava. It's not the rasa or the loving mood of Uddhava. Let me see if I can find an answer to that question.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Guru Maharaj, you mentioned that Krishna's, while instructing Uddhava, he spoke about the Avaduta, who gives that explanation of 24 spiritual masters. This is to teach Uddhava knowledge and detachment,
Yes.
jnana and vairagya.
Yes.
So we keep hearing that the knowledge and detachment will come when we are attached to Krishna. And Uddhava is already attached to Krishna. So what is the necessity for Krishna
He's reinforcing. Now, Uddhava, similar to Arjuna's becoming perplexed for the purpose of Krishna giving instruction to us. Similar, we mentioned this, when a perfected soul like Uddhava or others become bewildered, it's for the purpose of instructing us. Now, it happens again when he comes back to see Krishna, although he's been elevated once again to perfect knowledge. He comes back, and just before Krishna is departing, he's still feeling, disturbed. Naturally so. So Krishna again gives, we don't have the details, but again gives knowledge. It just helps reinforce.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It feels so painful, when you think of Uddhava, who is such a elevated devotee, when he is asking Krishna to take him back, and Krishna says, "No, you stay." He gives all this knowledge. Why didn't he take him back?
Well, Krishna knows best. And, for service, for increasing love in separation, for stimulating Uddhava's love by secondary rasa type of stimulation of his love. He's his friend, and one friend says something and another friend says something that's not what the first friend said. And although it's friend, Krishna is a superior friend, and he accepts what Krishna wants. And that's a happiness for Uddhava. It's a separation feeling which intensifies the love. And there's service. Krishna is concerned. Supposing he said, "Okay, come with me." Then what about the living entities that are left behind that didn't get transcendental knowledge because he went with him? Forget those people. They're not so dear to me. You're dear to me. You come with me. But so again, he knew Uddhava's capacity. He's not going to become bewildered. He'll be connected in a different way. Your question reminds me of a question somebody asked when they heard, this. Every time I hear the story of Lota Baba, I feel sad. Why didn't Krishna? Because he knew Lota Baba's attachment, and he etc. It's stimulating his love in a different way than coming back. And Krishna knows best. His interest is his devotee. Now, in the Lotabhava's case, he didn't go out preaching, but in Uddhava's case, he went out preaching. Why did Prabhupada sometimes send devotees, after spending time with him and getting attached to him, send them out preaching? And they said, no, I don't want to. He said, you go and preach. You do as I have done. My mission here is to give Krishna consciousness to the world. You assist me. So the connection is through the medium of service and the intensification of love through separation. It's just part of loving relationships.
Thank you, Maharaj.
When your son gets older and finishes his education and gets married, you may want him to live in the house, but he's not going to live in the house. Most likely, he's going to have his own house. So, love and separation.
Maharaj, this is little off the topic, but all the army from on the Pandavas side, they were also killed in the Kurukshetra battle.
They also what?
They were also killed in the Kurukshetra battle.
Who was killed?
The army on the Pandava side.
Yes.
So, how do we understand that?
They got liberation. They went back to Godhead.
Like they were
They're
trying...
not being punished. They went back to Godhead.
Okay.
They're going to die anyways. So they go back to Godhead. Quick. Zoom. What happened? Why Maharaj Parikshit? He cursed to die and he went back to Godhead. Shouldn't have been cursed. Then he would have gone back to Godhead. So
Yes.
quickly at least.
Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj.
Our what's right and wrong and our compass of what should be done, shouldn't be done. We need to, we can look at things through that lens, but we should put that to the side and consider a little differently the transcendental nature of loving exchange and how it doesn't move in a way that matches our sensibilities.
So, we have to also have that in mind, Maharaj, then that service comes like first. We may have attachment to Krishna, not may, but we have to develop the attachment to Krishna. But if the service calls for us to do things which are going to not make us go to Goloka, we continue.
You got it. And, that's the principle, and then application of the principle is where it gets a little difficult because we have our conditioning. We have our sensibilities. And our conditioning and sensibilities may not match connecting with Krishna better or more completely. So it's a struggle, but that's our journey back to Godhead, is that particular kind of struggle. Our paradigm doesn't match the spiritual paradigm.
So as Kali Yuga progresses, Maharaj, we can see so many things now itself which are like kind of not good or whatever.
Yeah, and that has become the norm.
Yeah, and so the devotees will continue to have service to even in that bad situation to continue preaching.
Yes, but selecting association may be a little more difficult as time passes, because demoniac tendencies will become more abundant.
Okay. So if we don't do our good job on Krishna consciousness, we have to continue.
That's exactly Prabhupada's advice. Yes, if you don't complete your path of bhakti, In your next life, you pick up where you left off in this life. But as Kali Yuga time passes, it becomes more difficult and more difficult. A good association and transcendence becomes more difficult because of the opposing atmosphere. So there's the weaknesses inside, and it's not going to happen in your next life. The weakness becomes so many times greater, but the opposition is going to become so much greater. The forces working against is going to become greater. So be smart. Finish up your business. Easier said than done, but that's the principle.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
Maharaj.
I think we're ready for in the room questions. I mean, online questions. I'm sorry. Online.
This question from Snehavalli Mataji. My question is related to the chronology of events. In the document which was shared, it is mentioned that before Vidura met Uddhava in Vrindavan, he visited Prabhasa. I would like to know if there are details of that visit because Krishna had already left the planet by that time.
No. Oh, Maitreya's visit. Vidura's visit. Vidura's visit. Yeah. Krishna had already left. We don't have details. It's in the Canto 3, Chapter 1. There's some detail, but it doesn't give a lot. He visited, he found out they had left. So although he knew that they had left before he met Uddhava in Vrindavan, he doesn't let on that he knew that they left. And the reason given is you don't give bad news. Same as when he went back to Hastinapur, he didn't give the bad news. Everyone's left. He didn't, because it's one of the Chanakya Pandit's sayings. Don't be the deliverer of bad news, because then the unhappiness that people feel get reposed on the person who delivered the bad news. So he didn't lie. He just didn't disclose that they had left. They inquired, but he didn't disclose.
This question is from Radhika Priya. Is there a comparison and contrast between what Lord Krishna spoke to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita versus what he spoke to Uddhava in Srimad Bhagavatam?
This is the second time this question has been asked, and I'm sure that there is. But how to elaborate on that, I don't know a document that she can refer to or that I can refer to that matches the two. That's it. Anything else in the room? Yes?
Comment.
Comment, fine.
I have been reading Bhagavatam, and I'm on 11th canto and in Uddhava Gita section. And like this last question, when I'm going through these different verses and chapters, I miss Srila Prabhupada's commentary, because I can feel like he would connect this with the verses in Bhagavad Gita or something. And in Uddhava Gita, I feel like there's much more details than in Bhagavad Gita. I had a question asked, like somebody had said that Srila Prabhupada said that no meat eating is something that Prabhupada introduced. Krishna never says that in Bhagavad Gita. And
You heard somebody say that?
yeah.
Okay.
So
It's in the Bhagavatam.
just saying Patram Pushpam Phalam Tuyam was not enough. But then in Uddhava Gita, Krishna directly says. So that's.
Well, there's 4 pillars of sinful life. That's in first canto also.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just a comment.
Okay. Okay. Anything? No? Okay. Prabhupada ki jai.